You see there's do know or yes. So all of you have done the ankle and foot fitness test? Yes. Good job. That'll make this a lot more informative and a lot better for you. So let's talk about first a little bit about what ankle and foot fitness means and what it is. So what I look at for ankle and foot fitness is that your feet need to be strong, mobile, flexible, have excellent endurance, and you need to have excellent movement patterns and be able to be coordinated so that you can do any activity that you want. So I'm assuming that most of you are here either because you currently have a foot or ankle problem or issue that you're dealing with, and you're wanting to figure out how to correct it or fix it so that you no longer have that issue. And some of you may be here because you are super active and you've had an injury in the past and you want to know how to stay healthy and injury free, and looking for preventative things. So put in the chat for me, guys, what it is that brought you here, and what it is you're looking to get out of class today. Let's look at the chat. Okay, so let's get started with what you can expect today. So we are going to go through the whole ankle and foot fitness test one piece at a time so that you all really understand how to do each piece. We're going to be talking about why that particular movement is important and exactly how to go through it. And so I would love for all of you, take your shoes off if you haven't already done that, and be nice, comfortable so that you can follow through and do the movements with me. That way, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat. What I'm going to do for most of the class is I'm going to wait till the end of the class. It should take a little less than an hour to go through the whole test. And then I would love for you guys to stay for a good, at least like a 30-minute Q&A. So if any of you have specific issues or problems as you're going through, it's okay to go ahead and put it in the chat now. I may not address it until we go to our Q&A, but please definitely put your questions in the chat. Okay, guys? So when we have fit feet, it allows us to be able to do all the activities that we want to. So our feet are our most important structure when it comes to having to be able to be up on our feet and doing all our fun activities. So if we're walking, running, jumping, playing pickleball, hiking, crossfitting, any kind of exercise that we do, most of it is up on our feet. And so that's why we're looking at our foot and ankle fitness today. And we're looking at getting our feet as healthy and strong and fit as possible to allow us to be able to do all the activities that we love. My goal is to have everyone be as active as possible. And the only way that we can really do that is if we have fit, healthy feet. So a couple of days ago, I was visiting my daughter and the low tire pressure came on in my car. And when that happened, it caught my attention because typically that only comes on right when there's a significant change in pressure. So the first thing I did was go and look and see what's the difference in pressure. And one of my tires was about 10 pounds low. So I thought, okay, that's significant. So I paid attention to it. And then I went outside and looked at the tire. I didn't see anything on the outside physically wrong, but it was low. So I went and I put air in the tire. And then I let it go overnight so that I could test in the morning to see maybe it was just low because I'd gone up and down from elevation or if there was a problem. So I went and took care of it. And then the next morning, sure enough, there was an active leak and it was down almost 20 pounds. And so I went and took care of it. So our feet are an awful lot like our tires. So we're lucky because at least the tires on our car, there's 4 of them. But for us, our tires, we only have these 2 feet. And just like with our car, when something goes wrong with that tire, it stops the whole machine, right? And the same thing happens with our feet. We have even the slightest bit of pain, lack of motion or problems in our feet, it really slows us down or stops us from doing all those activities that we love. So that's why I created the ankle and foot fitness test, is because I noticed through all my years of treating as a physical therapist that there are only a few things that are lacking and missing and go wrong when a person has a foot or ankle issue. And as soon as we restore those problems, their pain and problems go away in their feet. And so this test is going to go through all the primary components of healthy, fit feet to be able to determine whether you have fit, healthy feet. So when I went to visit my daughter, same daughter, Ellie, she moved and it was in the same town. I knew how to get to the town, but I didn't know how to get to her house. And so I had to put in the GPS her new address. So I'm sure all of you have used maps or GPS when we schedule out when we try to figure out a plan of how to get where we're going to go. And so you put in the GPS, not just the end point, but you also have to put in the starting point. And that's, again, why I created this ankle and foot fitness test, is I noticed that people really don't have a clear sense, first of all, of what pieces are important for them for foot health and how to measure and assess them. And that way you can have a tool to know, where am I and where am I starting? So just like we start on the GPS with our starting point, this ankle and foot fitness test is going to do the same thing. We're going to figure out exactly where are you today. So that way we know starting point, and then we can develop a plan and figure out where you're going next. And that way you'll know what you do need to work on and what you don't need to work on. Sometimes that's just as important. And that way you can add these different movements and exercises into your regular daily program if you're finding that there's some issues. So before I should probably introduce myself, shouldn't I? Some of you already know me. Some of you don't know me. I'm Dr. Jessica Lack. I'm a physical therapist, and I've been treating, it feels like forever. So I've been a therapist for over 30 years, and I've been specializing in just foot and ankle for the last 20 years. And I live here in Big Bear Lake, California, and I started treating the Pacific Crest Trail hikers 3 years ago, because most of their issues are foot and ankle. And so what I did was, with treating only foot and ankle for so many years, I noticed that there's always two problems. Anytime a person has a foot, ankle, hip, or knee issue, they all had the same thing missing. They all were missing a motion in our ankle called ankle dorsiflexion. I'm going to explain that in a minute. And they all had kind of a funky, wonky movement pattern. And so what I realized in treating everyone was that the majority of what I do when I treat is I teach you how to identify all these parts yourself and how to treat them yourself. And so I realized 30 to 40% of what I was doing was my actual hands-on. But I saw a huge need. And that need was that people need to have a better understanding of their bodies and how their bodies function and how our movement affects our foot and ankle. And so I wrote a book called Happy Feet, Happy Hike, The Ultimate Hiking Guide to Eliminate Foot and Ankle Injuries. And I wrote in this book, that was one of the primary sections, is that I created this ankle and foot fitness test in order for people to have the tools that they need to be able to have fit feet. Okay, so let's get going. How we just talked about how our lack of ankle motion and our funky movement pattern are the two pieces that control whether our feet are healthy or not. And this is just in my experience, and this is just how I see the body and how I treat my patients. So this is just my opinion of what I have found is missing and what I find works when you replace it. So let's talk about the most important concept first. We're going to just go through this really quickly because this is the basis and the foundation for all the movements that we're going to be doing in the ankle and foot fitness test. Okay. So I want to explain this principle, and then we'll get on and get moving and start go through the test. So when I talk about ankle motion, let me move this so you can see my foot. Can you guys see my foot? So when I talk, oh yeah, you can see my feet well. So when I talk about ankle dorsiflexion, I'm talking about the ability for my foot to be able to come back like this. Now, that motion is called dorsiflexion. When we point our foot forward, that's called plantar flexion. So that's what our foot does. We call it those movements when our foot's up in the air. However, that's not how we move our feet. What's important is, what do our feet do when they're touching the ground? And when our feet touch the ground, they do a very, very different motion than they do when they're in the air. So that same motion, ankle dorsiflexion, is this, bending. So anytime we bend or squat, anytime we bend our hips and knees, the motion also has to come from our ankles. And so what we're looking at is the motion in this bone right here. That's called our talus bone. I'm going to do just a really quick, I'm going to show you what's important at this joint, because every movement we do, we need to make sure that this bone is in excellent alignment. And honestly, here, I'll come back up so you can see me. And honestly, that is the linchpin of all of this. If we do not have excellent motion in that bone in our ankle, then everything kind of goes wonky. So our body's job, our primary job, is to hold us upright against gravity. And what is gravity? Gravity is a perfect vertical force, right? And so movement 101 is this. If our body's job is to hold us upright against gravity, and gravity is a perfect vertical, the way that we are going to set our body up for excellent movement and not be injured easily is we want to stack our ankle bones underneath our knees, underneath our hips, okay? And when we're in this good, stacked, well-aligned position, our body functions awesome. And this is how we were designed. When we stand, we're meant to stand in this pattern where everything is stacked. The problem is, and this is where we're going to tie it all together with the foot and ankle health, is that if we do not have enough bend in our ankles, our ankle joint is meant to be really movable and mobile and flexible. It's not meant to be stiff and rigid. And it's meant to move that way so that we move well. So what happens is, when our ankle joint does not bend, our body is still going to move. And so we compensate and we gain motion from a different part of our body. So if we can't bend here, what we'll do is we'll gain motion from our knee or our foot by either standing wide or turning our feet out. But now look at the funky pattern in my legs. Do you see all that? Now I'm no longer straight, am I? And this not being straight causes stress on my knee and in different areas of my foot. So I wanted you to understand why that ankle motion is so important, because if we do not have enough motion in our ankle joint to have it bend and come back appropriately, our body will have to compensate. And that's where all the breakdown and the foot and ankle issues come from. Okay. And that's why you guys have all done the test. That's why I put ankle range of motion first, because if we do not have full ankle range of motion, that we're still going to be, we're not removing the reason why we have the pain and the problem. Okay. And that's why we're going to be doing it first. I have one more piece to teach you about that, and then we'll get started with the test. So let me put this down really quickly. So I want you guys to take a look at your ankle, and there's these two bones here on either side. Those are called the malleolus. Okay. These two bones are also like my hand. Okay. So each finger on my hand, can you guys see that? Okay. Is the upper part of my ankle joint. So this is representing the upper part of my ankle joint. My fist is representing the talus bone. So the talus bone is this guy that I pointed to earlier. That bone, that joint is the most important joint for movement to allow us to move well. So this is what needs to happen. In order for that ankle bone or talus to be able to go back all the way in order to be able to bend your foot back, that bone first has to sit boop, right up there in the center. Once it sits in the center, then it's free to move. And that motion is the ankle motion, dorsiflexion that we're talking about. Does that make sense, you guys? Did everybody see that? And that is what we're going for with all of the movements we do. And through the test, when I say put your ankle in neutral, line up your leg, that is why. We are putting that ankle bone. Many of us, like for me, when I stand, and many of you probably do the same, when we stand, if our foot falls inward or we pronate, look where that positions and puts the bone. Well, if the bone is over here, it no longer has room and ability to move back. Does that make sense? And so I'm going to show you that's what the talar tilt is. And that's why it's second. It takes that bone and it pulls it to the center to allow you to have full motion. I'm going to keep talking about this, not right now. We're going to get moving into the test, but I will reinforce this throughout the entire test. And anytime I say tilt your talus, that's the second motion that we're doing, and I'm going to teach that to you. Every other movement that we do needs to come from that position, because if we can't do that motion seated at rest, there's no way our body's going to be able to do it when we're standing, when it really matters. And that's why I have the test broken up into sections. And also today, we're not going to be going through every single rep, and we're not going to be doing both sides. The intention of today is to make sure that you understand the movements and that you're doing them correctly. And then that way you can go back and retest. And I'm just going to give you lots of pointers and tips and tricks about the movements as we go along. Okay, so let me change my camera just a second and let's get started. So another little housekeeping thing is what I did was I actually printed out my ankle and foot fitness test just for ease of following. If you guys have yours with you, I would really recommend, do you guys have it? Yeah, I would pull it out. That way you can refer to it. Yeah, there you go. Does everybody have theirs? I think so. Yeah, thanks guys. I can see you on the screen. I'm going to shut this off real fast. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to shut off the... There we go. Okay, guys. So we have these out. So let's get started. So for the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at your ankle range of motion. So I'm going to do it slightly differently than I have it in your test. As I've worked with more and more people doing the test, I find that starting out with your foot being so far away from the wall, it's too much. So this is, I'm going to put this down. And there, can we see here? Yep. So what we're going to do is get into a high kneeling position like this. Can you guys? Yep, you can see me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my foot to the wall. And I'm going to have my ankle, my knee, and my hip basically at a 90-degree angle. And then what we're going to do is bring our knee forward toward the wall. But first, I really want you to see this. This is the most important part of the test. I don't think you can quite see me. Let's bring this down. How's that, guys? Yeah, that's better. There, that's better. So what we're looking at is when we bend our knee. So I'm sorry, when we bend our ankle. So as we bring our knee forward, we're looking at how much does our ankle bend. What we need to look at is we first need this bone to be here in its neutral position. If our knee is falling in, our ankle's going to fall in, and that's not a good, you can see the crooked. That's not a well-aligned position. So you want to open your knee and keep your knee tracking over between the second and third toe as you come forward. And you're going to keep your heel down. So this is what that's going to look like. Let's go this way. So with our foot up against the wall, we're going to come forward and keep our heel down. So I'm curious, were all of you able to do this at least with the foot against the wall? Or was this, yeah, can I have a thumbs up if that was okay for you? So then what you're going to do is just gently slide that foot back just a little bit and then retest And you're going to keep doing it that way until you have a sense of where your limitation is. So either your heel's going to come up or your knee's going to fall in. And this part's really important too, guys, is that I really want you to compare the right side with the left side. And that way, even if they're both a little bit limited, let's get a sense of, are they the same as each other? That's one thing I didn't talk about at the beginning, which is absolutely critical, is everything we do, we need to compare the right and the left both to each other. And our body will work the best and have the least amount of issues if we're as symmetrical or the same on each side as we possibly can be. Okay. All right. So that was the ankle range of motion. So let's talk really quickly also. I'm just going to reset up my camera here. Is when you were doing that test, if you were experiencing, let's see here, I'm curious as to what stopped you from being able to go further forward. Was it like a pinching feeling in the front of your ankle, or was it more of a, whoo, that's a really big stretch in the back of your calf? So depending on how, like what you felt is going to determine what the problem is. And so if it was just simply the stretching of the calf, that means you probably have really good motion in your ankle, but have a lot of tightness in the tissue. However, if you were the person that's like, it either feels pinchy or it just won't go, that means that you have that bony block and that bone won't go back all the way. Okay, so let's take a look. Let me grab something really fast. Can you guys see me okay right there? That's better right there, huh? So the first motion we're going to do, so we're on section 2 now. We just finished section 1, and we're going to start the seated exercises, and A is the tailor tilt. So there's a reason I have this as second, and we already talked about it a little bit. So what it is this motion is going to correct the position of the talus so that everything is working better. Without this motion, all the rest of this test is going to be very, very challenging and very difficult for you. So we need to restore this first. And if you were the person that really felt that blocky feeling or the pinching, it's probably because of this talus bone and it not moving the way it means to. So this is what we're going to do. Taking our foot's flat on the ground, our leg is basically in a 90-degree angle. And what we're going to do is gently rock this bone inward so that our foot collapses in or pronates. And then we're going to bring this back to center, and then we're going to rock it to the outside. There we go. And that is the tilting. So when people talk about pronation and supination, I'm going to show you what that is in case some of you don't know what that is. So here, my ankle is in neutral, which just means that that talus bone is right up in the socket where it belongs. And when I drop that bone inward, it flattens out my arch. That's pronation. And then as I lift it and go to the outside, that's supination. That's the motion that we're doing. That's what's going to place that bone back in its middle, well-aligned position. Okay. So for this motion, what you don't want to do is to lift your toes and rock your whole foot up like this. So as we supinate our foot or rock this bone, we're leaving our toes on the ground. And notice how when I do this, look how it creates an arch. And that's the whole point, okay? And this neutral position is the position from which we're going to do all the rest of our exercises. Okay. Okay, number 2 is toe curls. So now in the second section, we're on letter B, which is toe curls. So again, we're going to be at this 90-degree angle and our foot ankle is in neutral. This is very important. If your talus is fallen inward, look, I can't even bend my toes. Do you see that? you know what? That's not a very good picture. Let me bring this down a little bit so you can see me a little bit better. Let's try that. Yeah, that's better. Can you guys see me a little bit better? So the letter B, so 2B, the toe curls, what you're going to do is we are going to bend our toes by creating an arch in our foot to allow the tips of our toes to touch on the ground. There we go. So we're going to curl, lifting up the arch until the tips of my toes rest. What's important about this is that we want to bend from way back here. What we don't want to do is bend from the middle joint of our toes, okay? What we're wanting to do is to improve the mobility and the strength of the muscles in the bottom of our foot. The reason why this is important is that our toe flexibility, or having toe flexibility, means that all those little tiny foot muscles, that they need to be flexible and strong. And so the reason why that's important is that when our foot lands on the ground, when we're outside, when we're on uneven surfaces, or even when we're on carpet, when our foot lands on the ground, our foot softens, and it's meant to conform to the ground that we're standing on. And like grass and rocks and sticks and dirt tend to be uneven, right? And our foot needs to be able to respond to that. And it's absolutely critical that we have really good toe flexibility. And in order to create an arch, we also have to be able to flex our toes. Okay. All righty. So let's move on to C, which is a heel raise. So this is important for just general foot mobility and to be able to get good toe extension. This is an important part of, if you guys can't see me, this is an important part of pushing off when we walk. It's important for jumping and for squatting down. Like if we have to squat down and do something, look at all that extension of our toes. And many of us can't do that. A lot of us have bunions or have had bunion surgeries or just don't have a lot of flexibility in the toes. And so that's why we're doing this particular exercise and why we're looking at it. So heel raise. For this one, so the others we started in this 90-degree angle. For this one, we're going to actually pull our foot back underneath us. So it's kind of underneath our fanny. And then what we're going to do is raise our heel so that we're resting on the ball of our foot. There we go. And then we're going to gently come back down. So I want to show you something when you do this. As you lift, I want you to concentrate on having the weight on your toes go through the second and third toe. So you're going to lift that heel so the force is evenly distributed through your toes. Most of us do this. Do you see the difference where I'm twisting my foot and I'm going to the pinky? When you do this, I want you to be able to come straight forward. Okay. There you go. Now, next thing we're going to do is 2D, our toe raises. So I thought after I named this, when I see toe raises, I think people are going to do this and just raise their toes. So what this is the original motion that we talked about, that ankle dorsiflexion. That's what this is. The reason why this movement is so important is that in a seated position, in a 90-degree angle, it's really measuring how much motion. Again, there's that dorsiflexion motion that I keep harping on, right? And so in this 90-degree angle of my knee and ankle, can I lift up? Okay. What's absolutely important about this motion is that, check this out. If I let my ankle fall in and pronate, look, I can't even begin to lift my foot, because when I pronate, I'm going to do it the opposite way because of how my arm works, is when we overpronate, but I'm really going to the inside, it blocks the bone and it can't go back, right? So it's that same principle. So if you've tried this and you can't do it, I bet you can if you bring your ankle to neutral. So supinate that foot, do your tailor tilt, come to neutral, and then try lifting your foot. But if you had a limit in your motion at the wall, then you're probably not going to be able to do this in this position. So what I want you to do is to bring your foot forward a little bit, and then see if you're able to lift, okay? And what this is doing is strengthening it's looking at the ability to move and use the anterior tib muscle here. So as you lift, you should see this tendon pop out, okay? All right, perfect. How's everybody doing? Everybody hanging in there? All right, I'm excited to hear questions afterwards. Okay, so was that everything? Oh, nope, pinky toe tap. Oh, that's what I forgot to tell you guys, is if you're going to be doing these along with me, is you'll need a pen, and I need to grab mine. There we go. So pinky toe tap. So why is this important? So the primary reason is that we will not be able to tap our toe side to side if we're not in this neutral position. And so what's interesting is when we come to neutral, we're using this muscle, the posterior tib, but then to lift and move our toe, I'll show you with the pen, side to side, we have to coordinate the movement between this muscle, the anterior tib, and its neighbor, the posterior tib. And this is absolutely critical with walking. Really any movement that if you're not standing in place, if you're moving through space, then you really need to be able to have this coordination. And I find lots of people just aren't physically able to do this. But again, it's typically because they didn't understand that their ankle needs to be neutral first. So that's just like, if ever in doubt, if something's not working right and you're trying to do an exercise, trying to do a movement, and you're just like, it's not working, check your neutral ankle position. That's probably the problem. So we're going to put the pen down between our second and third toe, and we're going to lift up and tap our pinky from side to side. There we go. And that's it. Pinky toe tap. What I didn't say also about these exercises, the seated exercises, is that did any of you, I'll see if you guys can give me a show of hands, did any of you have cramping when you were doing it? Any of them? No, Tony? Anybody else? Yeah, you, okay. Yeah, that's normal. And honestly, I thought on my right foot I would start to cramp a little bit, but I didn't. So what happens with the cramping is it's one of two things. It's either, people often say, oh, it's because it's doing too much work or more work than what it's used to. That does cause cramps, but not so much when you're doing an active exercise. What I find is that it's more of a nervous system thing. It's like your body's trying to figure out how to send the signal and figure out what's going on. And if it's a new movement that you're not used to, it's your body's way of what's going on. And so what you'll notice is you don't want to work through the cramp. You always want to stop and let the tissue settle down, and then just relax your foot and then go back into the movements and try them again. And what you'll probably notice is that that goes away a little bit as you actually continue on. Was that true for you guys? Or did it just get worse? Because if it just gets worse, it means that, yeah, kind of, if it gets worse, it does mean that that muscle is just fatigued and that it's not used to that movement. But if you're the person that as you go along and do the movement and it settles down, it was just your nervous system getting used to it. Okay, so we are done with section 2, all the seated stuff. So now we're going to go into section 3, which is all the standing exercises. So I'm going to just adjust my camera here real quick.